من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Is the sound coming clearly for everyone? I'm not hearing any. It's coming clearly. Please recite with salawat. So we've been discussing this concept of religious pluralism and the challenge that it poses for us. And yesterday we began speaking about this set of verses from Surah Al-Ma'idah, which has in its background that story that I mentioned. That's also narrated in various ahadith. In Majma al-Bayan, there's this narration that tells us that this group of Jews, they came, asked the question of the Prophet, not because they wanted understanding, not because they were interested in converting or knowing what the Islamic stance was, only opportunistically because they wanted to see if the Islamic ruling was somehow easier than the Jewish ruling. Then as a cop-out, then they would say, that's great, we'll take your ruling. We don't accept you as a prophet, we don't accept any legitimacy for you or the Quran or any of this. But as a way out, we'll take your ruling and apply it because it's easier than our own ruling. And this is a game that they were playing, and this is one of the reasons why the Quran really comes down hard on the Bani Israel, on the Jewish community, because of these games that they would play with Allah and with the law. يُخَادِعُونَ اللَّهَ. They try to constantly trick Allah in their own kind of ignorance, when really they're only causing harm to themselves and tricking themselves. So we were speaking about these verses. Again, the address of the verses is Surah Al-Ma'idah, verses 41 through 48. We went through several of them. The last one we read was verse number 43, where Allah says, وَكَيْفَ يُحَكِّمُونَكَ وَعِنْدَهُمُ التَّوْرَاةِ. How is it that these Jews, being Jews, come and make you their arbiter, when they themselves have the Torah in their possession, that has the ruling of God in it? Right? But the problem is that they don't even believe in their own book. That's their true problem. They're not coming to you honestly with a conscience where they're trying to seek a true answer. They're simply trying to play games. Then Allah, as an aside, He speaks about the Torah in general. He says, "Inna," it's the next verse, verse number 44. "Inna anzalna at-Tawrata fiha hudan wa nurun yahkumu biha an-nabiyyuna alladhina aslamu lilladhina hadu." He says that we sent down the Torah in which there's guidance and light. Now the Mufassirin, they have done different studies to try to understand. The Quran sometimes uses these words, huda, nur, and some other words like kitab, hikmah, in certain as keywords that represent certain things that we now translate in other ways. I mentioned kitab. Oftentimes some of our commentators say kitab often means the law, and hikmah often means the belief systems. So it's a Quranic vocabulary that we have to get used to by having a comprehensive look at the whole Quran. I won't get into the details of that and trying to establish, what does huda here mean, what does nur here mean. That's not so important for what we're talking about. But in the Torah there is guidance and light. يَحْكُمُ بِهَا النَّبِيُّونَ الَّذِينَ أَسْلَمُوا. Those prophets who all have done Islam and have all submitted, they all used to judge based on this Torah. That word aslamu comes here again. Remember, a few days ago we had those verses, Inna Dina Indallahi al-Islam, that the religion in God's eyes is Islam, complete submission to Him. So here also, there's no need to say those prophets who did Islam, who submitted. Of course, all the prophets submitted. But Allah makes it a point to highlight this feature of all the prophets. That all the prophets who subscribe to the religion of Islam, which is the primordial and only religion in God's eyes, all of those prophets, they judged based on the Torah. Right? Of course, all those prophets who were the Bani Israel prophets, from Moses to Jesus. Peace be upon them all. They judged based on the Torah for those who were Jews. لِلَّذِينَ هَادُوا وَالرَّبَّانِيُّونَ وَالْأَحْبَارُ بِمَا اسْتُحْفِظُوا مِنْ كِتَابِ اللَّهِ. And also, not only do the prophets judge based on the Torah, those godly men and those priests amongst the Jews, they also judge based on the Torah, based not on the revelation they received, like the prophets received revelation directly from God. In the case of the godly scholars and the priests of the Jews who were not prophets, they were entrusted, right? They were given the trust of the Torah for safekeeping and for proper implementation. They also, those righteous men amongst the priests of the Jews, they also judged based on the same Torah. وَكَانُوا عَلَيْهِ شُهَدَاء, and they were witnesses to its revelation and to the covenant, basically. فَلَا تَخْشَوُا النَّاسِ وَخْشَوْنِ. So this part of the verse, there are two possibilities. The possibility that at least Allah Tabai prefers is that this is a continuation of the description of these Jewish rabbis and priests, the righteous amongst them. That they were given the Torah, they were given the law, they judged based on that. And one of the parts of that covenant, one of the conditions of that covenant was that they should not fear people, they should only fear God. Now, this is important. We may not realize the importance of it unless you put yourself in the position of a judge. Or someone has to make a decision who's right in the middle of the conflict. If you've ever had the I don't know, fortune or misfortune, probably misfortune of being the arbiter between a dispute of a couple who can't get along and they're trying to come together or divorce or whatever it is, if you're in the middle of that trying to mediate that difference, or you're in your community, if you have had any fights and you have someone who has to come in and try to mediate the differences. At work, maybe there are fights and someone has to come and mediate. Being in that position of a mediator, an arbiter, a judge between groups that are at each other's throats is an extremely difficult position. Right? This is the position that all the prophets were entrusted with. Right? To judge between people fi makhtalafu fi, in which way they used to differ. Right? That's one of the most important roles that a prophet is supposed to perform. And in that position, right, why is it that bribery, we always talk about bribery when we're talking about judges and court cases and these kinds of things, because that's the kind of position where bribery comes into play. Where it's a temptation for someone who's weak in their morals, because there's so much pressure, both sides are pulling it at them, and they're in this position where they now have to judge and say who's right and who's wrong. It's very tempting to be influenced by different things, by different kickbacks and bribery and these kinds of things. And so the prophets are also constantly warned, La takhshawun nas wakhshawni. Don't fear people, don't consider what people will think if you judge for them or against them, whether they'll be your friends, whether they'll be your enemies. That's not important. What's important is that you judge justly. I fear me, because if you judge based on the bribes you're getting and the kickbacks you're getting, then you're going to have to face me on the Day of Judgment. So that fear should be greater in your heart than the fear of the retribution of these people, which is nothing compared to my retribution for you not acting justly. Right? So this was part of the covenant that the Jews were given. As they're given the Torah, they're made to promise that they will fear God and not fear people, judge based on what's right, not judge based on political expediencies and based on kickbacks and bribery and these kinds of things. Which is, by the way, exactly the problem that those people in that story had. The Khaybari Jews and the Jews of Medina who came to the Prophet, this was their problem, that they had decided that the law of the Torah, which was for adultery, which was a capital punishment, stoning to death, that was fine for lay people. The riffraff, the lay people, who cares? If we have to kill them, we'll be really just there. We'll implement the law. But when it comes to our own, the special, the elite, the rich, the wealthy, good families, how can we be so harsh with them? They're our friends. Right? They're the ones who support us. They're the ones who pay our paychecks. Right? We can't be harsh with them. We'll have to find a way. Right? So their justice was opportunistic, where there was power and there were no stakes because they're nobodies in their minds. They're nobodies. They're regular people. They're willing to be very just, very righteous. And where it came to their own friends and their own allies, there all of a sudden justice went out the window, and now they're looking for every sort of back corner, back alley to see if they can find a way to get out of implementing the law. فَلَا تَخْشَوُا النَّاسِ وَخْشَوْنِي وَلَا تَشْتَرُوا بِآيَاتِي ثَمَنًا قَلِيلًا. Allah very clearly says, and don't sell my verses for a paltry price. Right? I've sent you this law, don't go and sell it and say, who's willing to pay me? How much are you willing to pay me to turn a blind eye to this verse? If you pay me enough, I never saw the verse. Right? So don't do this, Allah is saying. لا تشتروا بآياتي ثمنا قليلا ومن لم يحكم بما أنزل الله فأولئك هم الكافرون. And be warned, he's telling those same Jews and prophets, be warned that anyone who judges not based on my law but based on their own preferences, these kinds of things, then they are kafir. They are rejectors of the guidance of God. وَكَتَبْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ فِيهَا. The next verse tells us one of those laws that was there in the Torah, which is a law that we're also familiar with. وَكَتَبْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ فِيهَا. In that Torah, we wrote for them, we legislated for the Jews, أَنَّ النَّفْسَ بِالنَّفْسِ وَالْعَيْنَ بِالْعَيْنِ وَالْأَنْفَ بِالْأَنْفِ وَالْأُذُنَ بِالْأُذُنِ وَالسِّنَّ بِالسِّنِّ وَالْجُرُوحَ قِصَاص. Right? The famous quote that's also known in English. We wrote in the Torah that a life for a life, an eye for an eye, a nose for a nose, an ear for an ear, a tooth for a tooth, and all injuries would also be there would be retribution for them in kind. So if someone does something less than, for instance, chopping off your ear, if they punch you, if they give you a black eye, that's a jarh. Now you have the right in the court of law to inflict the exact same injury on that person. Right? Under the auspices of law, not as personal vendetta, as a personal retribution, but you have this right. فَمَنْ تَصَدَّقَ بِهِ فَهُوَ كَفَّارَةٌ لَهُ. If a person who is injured in one of these ways, if he decides to forego the retribution, to be generous, to be magnanimous and say, I know you've injured me, you're guilty of this, but I forgive you. I forgive you out of mercy so that inshallah Allah will forgive me. Right? Because I've also committed many sins, many crimes that Allah has the right to punish me for. I'm hoping that if I can show you mercy, then Allah will, as a reward for my mercy, show me mercy as well. كَمَا تَدِينُ تُدَانُ. Right? The universal rule, as you are judged, as you judge, so you will be judged. Right? And so he says in the verse, whoever does this and forgoes the right that they have to take revenge on the person, فَهُوَ كَفَّارَةٌ. That tasadduq of that person that he's giving to the other person is a kafara for his own sins. Right? So that's one option. Despite the fact that you have just retribution written, you have the option, in fact, that's better. Even in the Quran, when it talks about qisas, it says that it's better to وَأَن تَعْفُوا أَقْرَبُ لِلتَّقْوَى. To forgive the retribution is better and is closer to the fear of God than exacting that revenge, even though you have the right. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَحْكُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الظَّالِمُونَ. But if a person decides to take that revenge, but they go overboard and they come up with their own system instead of the system that God gave, then those people are oppressors, wrongdoers, and they are out of line. Alright, so we started with a story and a response, kind of a consolation to the Prophet that you don't worry, all your job is to communicate. These people are in the wrong, a description of their wrongdoing. And then Allah speaks about the guidance that was in the Torah, that was revealed in the Torah. Now he says, in the next verse, verse number 46, وَقَفَّيْنَا عَلَىٰ آثَارِهِمْ بِعِيسَى بْنِ مَرْيَمَ مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ مِنَ التَّوْرَاةِ وَآتَيْنَاهُ الْإِنْجِيلَ فِيهِ هُدًى وَنُورٌ وَمُصَدِّقًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ مِنَ التَّوْرَاةِ وَهُدًى وَمَوْعِظَةً لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. وَقَفَّيْنَا, قَفَّيْنَا means أَتْبَعْنَا. After Moses and the other Jewish prophets, we followed them up with Isa. Okay. So after all of those prophets, after Moses and his prophets, we followed it up with Isa ibn Maryam, who confirmed, he was musaddiq, he confirmed the Torah that went before him. Right? So this also corroborates our understanding that we've had for the past couple of days, that the relationship between Isa and Musa is a relationship of confirmation, of affirmation of what has been revealed, and at most update and tweaking of the message. Not that it's some new religion, a new kind of path that's separate from Moses' path, rather it's the same path that's now it's restored to its original state, plus expanded and updated and improved based on the greater capacity of humankind. So he came to confirm the Torah that went before him, and we gave him, Isa, the Injil, the Evangel. So some people have been asking about the Evangel and our understanding of that versus the Bible that we now have, the New Testament. So the New Testament that we have, the four Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, these are not the same as the Injil that's referred to in the Quran. These, if you want to understand them and find a parallel to the New Testament in our tradition, it's more like books of ahadith. The same way our books of ahadith are collections of eyewitness accounts of what a person heard the Prophet say or saw the Prophet do. Either directly if he was a companion, or indirectly if he was, for instance, the Imams who know not from seeing, but by the communication they've received directly from Allah or through the channels of the previous Imams. So these are eyewitness accounts of what the Prophet did and said. The New Testament is the same. These are eyewitness accounts. We'll talk about authenticity and whether they were there and who these people were. That's not important for this purpose right now. But they are written in a way that there are people who are listening to Jesus, peace be upon him, and hearing what he says, and then they're recording that in the form of these Gospels. So we have certainly some of what Jesus was telling them and preaching was from the Injil, and so that would then be recorded in the lines of the New Testament. But we shouldn't think that the New Testament as it stands is the Injil, or is really related in any close way to the Injil. Rather, it's reports of what people are claiming they heard Jesus say and saw Jesus do, and they're telling that. And because of that, we have discrepancies. Just like in ahadith, we have discrepancies sometimes. Someone says that they saw the Prophet say something or do one thing, and then there's a slightly different account from somebody else, based on either different understandings, different levels of aptitude, or sometimes evil intentions, where one person wants to twist what the Prophet said for his own personal gain. And so we have these two accounts that are different. So the same thing happens in the New Testament. Between the Gospels, you have discrepancies, sometimes stark contradictions, where there's no way both can be true. But we have them both there in the different Gospels. So here we're talking about the Injil, the Evangel, the good news that was given as a book to Isa alayhi salam, which is different than the New Testament. Fihi hudan wa nur. This also he describes as having guidance and light. The same two words that he used for the Torah. This book also had guidance and light. وَمُصَدِّقًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ مِنَ التَّوْرَاةِ. Again, he repeats the same descriptive phrase. He said, Jesus, ala nabiyina wa alihi wa alayhi salam, he was a confirmer of the Torah, and then the Injil, which was given to him, was also a confirmer of the Torah. وَهُدًى وَمَوْعِظَةً لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. It's guidance and it's an admonishment for the God-fearing. Verse number 47 says, وَلْيَحْكُمْ أَهْلُ الْإِنْجِيلِ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فِيهِ. Then let the Christians who are subscribers to the Injil, let them judge based on what has been revealed in the Injil. Just like he said the same, if you think of it, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the verses or you have them in your mind, but we had one section on the Jews, and now this is the second section on the Injil and the followers of the Injil, and then finally we're going to get to the Prophet himself and his revelation. So there's a parallel structure here. Allah is trying to show us this evolution of the message, and we'll see how it culminates in the revelation of the Quran. So he says that the followers of the Injil must judge based on what's in the Injil. This also clarifies something, because oftentimes our modern understanding of Christianity, at least in the West, is both Catholic and Protestant Christianity from the Western perspective, which is almost completely the work of Paul. Right, so Pauline Christianity is where we get the Trinity and where we get this idea of Jesus dying for people's sins and these kinds of things. The salvation is through accepting Jesus' death on the cross and these kinds of things. That's all Paul's invention, right? And in our hadith, Paul is condemned. He's one of the mad'uneen, right, mentioned by name in multiple ahadith, because he did to Christianity what we see now, the corruption that's there in Christianity, the deviation from the monotheism that was there, from the same message that we recognize as the true religion of God. The fact that it's deviated so much is traceable back to Paul. So Pauline Christianity is so different from Judaism because through this idea that Jesus has died for our sins, there's no longer any need to practice the law. The law of the Jews is no longer relevant. It's no longer about acts. Works is not what is going to get us salvation. It's simply belief in Jesus dying for our sins. Right? So belief alone, faith alone is enough. The acts of worship and of abiding by this law, this is no longer necessary. Right? This whole process of salvation through Jesus, in the Pauline Christianity, Pauline brand of Christianity, makes it so that you no longer have to abide by the Jewish law. Right? So that's why we have this conception now that Christianity has no law. It's just some ethical teachings, but mainly just this belief that you have to have in Jesus dying for your sins. Right? And the Bible is also not the New Testament the way we have it. It doesn't have any detailed law. It certainly has ethical principles. It does echo some of the laws from the Old Testament, but it's certainly not a book of law the way the Old Testament is, the way the Quran and the Islamic teachings are. But this is not the way Isa alayhi salam's religion was supposed to be. It was not some deviation from Musa. So like you've understood, it's a continuation of Moses' teachings. And so Isa alayhi salam, when the Quran describes his teachings, it says that he came musaddiqun, right, to confirm what Moses taught, and وَلِيُحِلَّ لَكُمْ بَعْضَ الَّذِي حُرِّمَ عَلَيْكُمْ, to make halal some of the things that were haram for you. So to change some of the laws, to make them easier for you. They were very strict in the Jewish law before Jesus. Now he's come as this last-ditch effort to make things easier, to see if the Jews give them one last chance to reform themselves. They still lost, they still failed, and so now they're out, they're cast out from Allah's pleasure, and they're condemned until the Day of Judgment. Right? So this verse also helps us to understand that they are judging based on the Injil, which shouldn't sound unusual because this is the way it was intended. Jewish law is supposed to continue through Jesus with some changes, but in large part intact. بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ وَمَنْ لَمْ يَحْكُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. And again he repeats the same thing, that they must judge based on what God has revealed in the Injil, along with the Torah. You can really think of the Injil as a companion to the Torah rather than a whole new book. It's more like an update. So you still have to have the Torah in hand, and then you have the Injil to tell you which things have been abrogated, which things you should change. If there's nothing, then you go back to the same law of the Torah. And so they should judge based on that. If they don't, then أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. These people are corrupt. The third section is now talking to our Prophet. وَأَنزَلْنَا إِلَيْكَ, right, to you, O Muhammad, we have now revealed Al-Kitab. بِالْحَقِّ مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ مِنَ الْكِتَابِ. We've revealed this book, the Quran, to you, confirming the books that went before. Don't be fooled by Al-Kitab. In Arabic, Al-Kitab, even though it's singular, the alif lam of jins can refer to books in the plural. Right? So just because it says Al-Kitab is one book, that doesn't mean it means one book, it means books. Right? It's referring to the books in general. Okay, so we've sent this book down as a confirmation for the books that were sent before. وَمُهَيْمِنًا عَلَيْهِ. This is an important phrase. Muhaymin, haymana in Arabic has to do with overpowering and kind of ruling over and looking over other things. Right? So the other books, it's like all the other books are there, all legitimate, all from God, but now the Quran comes as muhaymin ala al-kutub. Right? This is now a superior book, superseding the other books, including whatever was included there, changing certain things, tweaking certain things, now a complete version of what Allah has been sending down to people throughout history. Right? So muhayminan alayh is important for our discussion, because remember we're talking about pluralism. A pluralistic view wouldn't have any way to explain this muhayminan alayh. It would say the Torah was revealed for those people, Injil was revealed for these people, the Quran was revealed for these people, now everyone should just follow their own tradition. Just stick to your books, go back to your books, try to reconnect with what the original teachings were, and that's what you're responsible for. Jews should not become Christians, Christians should not become Muslims, everyone should just follow in their own tradition. Right? But to say now that this Quran is muhaymin and kind of overpowering and superseding the other books clearly shows that that's not the case. The Quran is now the only legitimate book, the only authentic book that can be followed, and whatever it says that matches up with the Injil and the Torah, then those parts of the Injil and Torah are legitimate. But if there's a contradiction between the two, which one rules? The Quran is muhaymin. The Quran rules over those. And that tells us that if it's a stark contrast where it's something obviously wrong, then that was clearly an adulteration to begin with. That was changed, not part of the original Torah and Injil. If it's a matter of law, that the Injil is telling you to fast in a certain way and the Quran is telling you to fast in a different way, then this is just a matter of abrogation, of naskh, where Allah has updated the rule and He's changed it based on whatever His wisdom is, and now the way we're supposed to be doing that act of worship is based on the Quranic ruling, not based on what was there in the previous books. Fahkum, he's addressing the Prophet, Fahkum baynahum bima anzal Allah. Now your duty, O Prophet, is to judge between people and amongst people based on what Allah has revealed to you in the Quran. وَلَا تَتَّبِعْ أَهْوَاءَهُمْ عَمَّا جَاءَكَ مِنَ الْحَقِّ. And don't follow other people's whims and desires. They want you to do things, they're pulling you and tugging you for their own personal interests, they're lobbying you. Don't be served by that. Don't let them make you veer away from that which Allah wants you to follow, which is true. Now this last phrase is the most challenging part of the verse. I'm going to read the translation from the same essay. Yesterday I shared this essay with you from Joseph Lombard. He uses this one last part of the verse as one of his cornerstones for his argument. So he translates the verse as follows. He says, "For each among you we have appointed a law and a way. And had God willed, He would have made you one community. But He willed otherwise, that He might try you in that which He has given you. So vie with one another in good deeds. Unto God shall be your return altogether, and He will inform you of that wherein you differ, or differed." So this last part of this last verse in this section, after seeing all these three different traditions described, the Jewish, the Christian, and the Islamic, in his interpretation, it's saying that we have revealed a separate law for each of these three different people, implying that they're all supposed to continue to exist. Right? So the Jews of today should continue to follow the law that was sent down to them, because we've sent down for each group their own law. Right? Admittedly, I think this part of the verse is a mutashabih part of the verse. Right? We have these two kind of descriptions that the Quran itself uses for itself. Some verses are muhkam and some are mutashabih. The muhkam verses are those that are clear in their meaning, where they're unambiguous. When you read it, it's very clear what it's saying. There's no interpretation, there's no wiggle room where you can say, oh, it could mean this, it could mean this. We're not sure exactly what it means. So some verses are like that, some verses are muhkam. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. God is one. There's no wiggle room to say, well, one from some perspective, but actually, no, He's actually three. Right? There's no way to interpret that any other way, and so it's a clear muhkam verse. This verse, on the other hand, is not like that. Right, let me read the Arabic to you and then try to help you to understand it in the context of what we read so far. لِكُلٍّ جَعَلْنَا مِنْكُمْ شِرْعَةً وَمِنْهَاجًا وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَجَعَلَكُمْ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً وَلَكِنْ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ فِي مَا آتَاكُمْ. Right, that's the troubling part of the verse, the difficult part of the verse. So he says that we have made for each of you, for each ummah, we have laid down a shir'ah and minhaj. These two words also, the commentators have some different opinions. My best understanding is that they're both the same thing. They're both referring to the law, just two different aspects of that law. Right? Minhaj is a very clear and open path, and sharia also has to do with that path. So we'll just understand it both to be the law. So for each of you, each of these groups, we have sent down a different law. All right, now that can happen in two ways. The way the pluralist thinks is that they're separate laws that are existing in parallel. The way we've understood it, and the fact that the Quran is muhaymin on the other three, and also temporally after those other two. It's muhaymin on the other two, and it's temporally after the other two. That tells us that it's not that these are three parallel religions, but rather this was for that ummah, the Torah was for that ummah, the Injil was for the new ummah at the time of Isa, and now the Quran is for the ummah of today. Now, one important thing to realize is that in the Quran, the word ummah is used differently than the way we're used to using it. When we, in our common language, when we say the ummah of Muslims, right, what do we mean? Does that include Christians and Jews and atheists and all? When we say ummah now, what are we referring to? Just Muslims, right? When we say ummah, we mean the Muslims. Right? In the Quran, on the other hand, ummah is not used for a particular group of followers of a faith. Ummah is used for the people of a particular time, when there's a particular prophet that all of those people are supposed to be following. So in the Quranic vocabulary, the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the ummah of Muhammad is not simply Muslims. The ummah of Muhammad is all human beings and even all jinn, all beings who are required to follow Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? So it's not only Muslims who are part of the ummah of the Prophet. All human beings from the time of the Prophet's bi'tha, when he announced his prophethood, until the end of time, are included in the ummah of our Prophet. And likewise, everyone from the time when Isa a.s. first declared himself a prophet, until the time when our Prophet's mab'ath took place, that was all the ummah of Isa a.s. Right? So the ummah is in that meaning. So here what Allah is saying that we made for every ummah a particular shir' and minhaj, a particular law. He's not saying for this nation, for this tribe, or this ethnic group, we've given one religion, and for this other ethnic group, we've given another religion. The way the pluralist thinks, that Jews, their law is the Torah, non-Jews have a different law. Rather, it's for each ummah, I mean each, not even generation, but each period of time in which that prophet is the prophet, the authentic, legitimate prophet of that time. During that time, Allah has given one set of laws. And then when the next prophet comes, the next Ulul Azm prophet comes, who is replacing the previous one, then a new law is given because times have changed, needs have changed, people's capacity is now increased, and so a more detailed law, a more complex law, a more useful law is sent that is more comprehensive than the previous one. And then finally we have the Quran, which is the most comprehensive, and then we're told Halalu Muhammad halal ila yawm al-qiyamah, or haramu haram ila yawm al-qiyamah. That this particular shir' and minhaj, this particular sharia of the Prophet is now the only valid sharia that will last all the way until the end of time. وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَجَعْلَكُمْ أُمَّةً وَاحِدًا. Now the verse, if you look at it literally, out of context, in isolation, it says, if God had wished, He could have made you one ummah. Which from a pluralistic perspective seems to say, if God had wished, He could have made you all into one religion. He could have made you all follow one religion. But وَلَكِنْ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ فِي مَا آتَاكُمْ. But He hasn't. Lakin, He doesn't, like the rest of it's elliptical. It doesn't say lakin what, but it's understood the context. However, He didn't wish that. He didn't want to make you one ummah. Rather, He wanted to make you multiple ummahs. Why? To test you through what He has given you. So now read that verse and listen to that again from a pluralistic perspective. The pluralist here sees that verse and hears that God could have made us all one religion. He could have made us all Jews, for instance. And made it so that until the end of time, Moses' law would carry out and we'd all have to follow that particular law. But He didn't. Right? He made us into these multiple religions and had multiple religions sent down with multiple laws. Why? So He can test us and see how we act based on what we've been given. So I've been given Islam, so my job is to be the best Muslim I can be. فَاسْتَبِقُوا الْخَيْرَاتِ, the verse continues, so vie with one another to do good deeds within your own tradition. As a Muslim, you vie as a Muslim. As a Christian, you vie as a Christian with other Christians, and as a Jew, you vie with other Jews. But each one is supposed to just kind of stick to his own, do what he's supposed to do, just mind your own business. And then at the end, إِلَى اللَّهِ مَرْجِعُكُمْ جَمِيعًا, all of you will return to Allah in the end. فَيُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِمَا كُنْتُمْ فِيهِ تَخْتَلِفُونَ. And He'll decide, He'll inform you about those things that used to differ. You had a difference of opinion about who Jesus was, whether He died for your sins or didn't, whether He died or didn't die, whether He was part of God or just a prophet of God, and all these different things. So He'll clarify things at the end. But right now, in the dunya, your job is just to be a good Christian, be a good Muslim, and be a good Jew. Okay? So that's the pluralistic interpretation of that last part of the verse. And as I mentioned, this part of the verse is mutashabih, it is ambiguous in and of itself, if you look at it in isolation. But with everything else that we've understood, the rule is, the system of the Quran is, that these muhkamat and mutashabihat have been revealed. Allah knows them. He's calling them mutashabih and muhkam himself. فِيهِ آيَاتٌ مُحْكَمَاتٌ هُنَّ أُمُّ الْكِتَابِ وَأُخَرَ مُتَشَابِهَاتٌ, and others are mutashabih. So some are muhkam, those are the core. I like to talk about them as anchors. You anchor yourself to those muhkam verses. For instance, in theological discussion we'll say, for instance, in Surah Al-Shura, Allah says, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. We recite it in the dua for Ramadan as well. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ, there's nothing like God. That's a muhkam verse that tells us whatever you think of, whatever descriptive, whatever you want to say, God is like this and like that, it's all wrong. There's nothing that you can think of or describe or imagine that is like God. Right? لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. That's a muhkam verse, that's an anchor. Now if you see another verse where he says, for instance, يَدُ اللَّهِ فَوْقَ أَيْدِيهِمْ, God's hand is on their hand. Right? In isolation you'll say, well, apparently God has a body and he has a hand. Or ثُمَّ اسْتَوَى عَلَى الْعَرْشِ, Allah sat on his throne after creating everything. It sounds like he has a chair, a big throne, and he's now sitting on it. Meaning he has a body, he's on top of this chair, and these kinds of things. So the apparent meaning in isolation seems to establish that God has a body like our body in some sort. So he has hands, he has a body. يَوْمَ يُكْشَفْ عَنْ سَاقٍ, right? The day when a leg will be exposed. And it sounds like if that's referring to God, then maybe he has a leg as well. So it seems like these verses are talking about different body parts of God, so maybe he has a body. Those are all mutashabih verses. They could be figurative, they could be literal. But now we have لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ, that's our anchor. There's nothing like God. So when we say, when God's describing himself and says he has a hand, يَدُ اللَّهِ فَوْقَ أَيْدِيهِمْ, don't think of a hand like your hand. Right? It's just an expression, it's figurative. The way, if you take bay'ah of someone, if you want to give me bay'ah, I put my hand on top, you put yours below, and now you pledge your allegiance to me. That's the relationship Allah wants to express. That yadullahi fawqa aydihim, Allah is, he's the upper, he has the upper hand in this relationship with you, in your covenant with him. It's a figurative meaning, clearly, because we have laysa kamithlihi shay'. We have the anchor of a verse which tells us nothing that you can think of and imagine is like God. Right? So the same thing here, we want to treat all those other verses that we've been looking at since the last couple of days that are very clear in saying that this narrative of a serial relationship between religions, not a parallel relationship between religions, that's the way the Quran is telling us that it is. And even this muhayminan alayh, the fact that the Quran is superseding all the other revelations, that's also very clear. So once you have all those clear verses that are giving you this narrative, then when you come up with an ambiguous part, which could mean that there are three separate traditions that all coexist, or it could mean that there are three in series, one for one ummah, and then later on, once that ummah is gone, a second ummah is given a second sharia, and then a third ummah at a latter time is given a third sharia. In series, not in parallel, then we should take this latter interpretation as the correct one. Not arbitrarily, but because we have so much evidence from all the other verses we've been looking at. Those are muhkam, those are strong verses, and so we use those as anchors to help us to correctly understand the one that's ambiguous. Inshallah, the time is out. Tomorrow I'll try to clarify this last part. There's still a little bit more of the verse left before we go to the next section and the next set of verses. So I'll clarify that, but right now if there are some questions about this last thing I said, then I can clarify through the Q&A, inshallah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa alihi. So think about 5 minutes if anyone has questions.
Is there any evidence of like the real evangel? Like, is there any version of the real thing?
So he's asking if we have any maybe relics of the real evangel. So we have there were Christian communities that were escaped from the Pauline Christianity. So like in Ashab al-Kahf, for instance, in that whole story of theirs, the Ashab al-Kahf were Christians. They were true monotheistic Christians, actual followers of Jesus, peace be upon him. Right? They hadn't yet, the corruption of the Trinity hadn't yet taken over the Roman Empire. It wasn't even the official religion of the Roman Empire at the time of Ashab al-Kahf. It was only at the time of Constantine when it finally became the law of the land, and then it was imposed, and this particular version of Christianity was imposed over all of the Roman Empire. That's when they wake up after 309 years, they see that the Christianity that's being practiced is the Trinitarian Christianity. It's a corrupt version. And they ask Allah to be able to go back to sleep and go back into their cave rather than have to face another struggle. They already faced one lifetime of struggle and persecution against pagans. Now they have to face the persecution of Trinitarian Christians. And they didn't want to face all that, so they wanted to go back into their cave. So there are Christian communities like that, and so we do have some archaeological evidence. There was a finding back, my history is not very good about this, but I believe in the maybe 60s or so, in a place called Qumran, like Qumran. And so there were these things called the Dead Sea Scrolls. They were kind of vessels that were filled with these scrolls, which were manuscripts or kind of copies of the Bible, the Injil, right? That aren't the same as the Bible we have now. Right? Those can be carbon dated to a time before Trinitarian Christianity took over, Pauline Christianity took over. And so we have that, and so a lot of scholarly work has happened around the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Gospel of Barnabas, and some of these other works. And so those have some of these things that the Quran talks about. It doesn't have the Trinitarian view of God. It talks about Jesus as a prophet. It prophesies our prophet as well. So these kinds of things are there in those books. But I've read some of these works on it, but I haven't done a lot of work to see from a scientific or kind of a secular perspective what kind of authenticity do they give to these sources. That's something that you can read up on. There's a lot of work that's been done on these other kind of manuscripts.
So you use the term ummah somewhat synonymous to generations when you spoke of the prophets being sent to every ummah.
Right.
And then when you speak of the fact that Allah didn't create all of us as one ummah, it seems that the definition came back to nations, different kinds of people again. So I'm wondering about what merits the difference in the usage of the term ummah.
Correct. Yeah, so that's part of the end of the verse. So I gave you the pluralistic explanation of the verse, but I didn't get to really focus on the explanation that I'm trying to focus on myself. So tomorrow we can clarify more, but basically the way our commentator, Allah Ta'ala, the way he says, وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَجَعَلَكُمْ أُمَّةً وَاحِدًا, what's implied there is if Allah had wanted, He could have counted you all, considered you all to be one ummah. He could have considered from Adam to the end of time all to be one nation, give you one law, and then that's it. And then that's going to hold true until the end of time. But He didn't want that to happen. Rather, He recognizes that He's given you different things. The fima atakum, the ma atakum is not simply revelation, but more importantly, our own capacity as individuals and as society. He's given us, in the earlier times, He gave people less capacity. Things hadn't advanced enough, so they had a simpler kind of religion. Then as the ma atakum increases, as the blessings of God and the capacity within human beings increases, then He gives us a more comprehensive system of law to be able to address that and deal with that. And so if He had wanted, He could have considered you all to be one nation, in which case He would have given you one sharia from beginning to end. Rather, He recognizes that ma atakum is different from one time to another time to another time, and so He gives you subsequent shari'as, each one in accordance with the capacity that people have during that time. Not to contradict one another, not to coexist, but rather each one replaces. Now capacity is increased, this one replaces the previous one because this one is more in tune with what your current needs are. And then subsequently the muhaymin one, the one that comes last, is going to be the most complete, as society has now reached a level where it's kind of at its peak. It's fully endowed with all those human blessings, then it can handle this last version of the Sharia, which will hold true until the end. So I'll try to reiterate that tomorrow, maybe a little more carefully. But that's the interpretation, the understanding of that last part that we have, based on the muhkamat that we've been looking at the last couple of days. One more question?
So on that question, is there room for an understanding of the term ummah and the more common sense that is not necessarily religious, but اختلاف ألوانكم وألسنتكم, that kind of understanding of
That's
nation.
fine. So all I was saying is that the Quranic use of the word is different from how we use it. That doesn't mean that it's wrong to use it as the way we use it. Oftentimes that happens, where words change over time, they mean something different over time. Ijtihad, we have so many ahadith that condemn ijtihad, and anyone who does ijtihad is in hellfire, these kinds of things, because at the time of those imams, ijtihad meant coming up with rules on your own, disregarding the Quran and Sunnah, and using your own opinion, your own ra'i, and legislating. So Abu Hanifa's work was called ijtihad, that was condemned. So that same term then over time came to be used to mean using the Quran and the Sunnah and deriving from that the laws that based on the Sunnah and the Quran, not kind of as opposed to the Quran and Sunnah. Yeah, so the terms changed. We can't say, well, the Imam Sadiq, he condemned ijtihad, so we should abandon ijtihad too. And that's not being smart about how words develop. So ummah in the Quran, if you look throughout the verses, the way it's used is in that sense, even in this verse. But the way we tend to use it in our own common vernacular now is in a different way. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with the usage. We just should be aware that when the Quran uses ummah, it's not using it the same way we now use it. Allah, we ask you to shower your mercy and blessings on Muhammad and the family of Muhammad. Help us, Allah, to understand your Quran. Sometimes it's difficult, and with the shabihat that we have to struggle with, help us and give us the patience and the fortitude to struggle through them and to arrive, inshallah, at answers and understandings that are compatible with the muhkamat of your Quran, that are in line with your intent in setting those verses down. Just guide us and keep us always on the straight path. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillah.